Hey folks, MasakoX here. We like to think outside the box here with some types of what-ifs, and on first glance, this story may seem like one of those scenarios that would probably be more fitting for the month of April. But there is quite a bit of logic here that could be used to place this story in somewhat plausible territory for Dragon Ball. The likes of Babidi, the show's closest character model surrounding sorcery and magic, who was taken from us far too soon in the original, could have become a good character, or at least one of those anti-hero types that the fanbase tends to like. You never know what they're gonna do, but they ultimately do help out the main team and aid them in their times of crises, if need be. If you remember part 3, Babidi's road to redemption was tested the most, when having to finish the thing he had originally started and full Nelsoning Kid Buu into oblivion. Yeah, that happened. And more can happen now that Beerus knows of his existence once more. In the last part, Beerus' return to the land of the awake was rather bombastic. Babidi spent most of this encounter though underneath a table, whilst the Super Saiyan God ritual unfolded before him, Goku fighting Beerus and all that, and the rest of the team standing around and doing nothing. Despite his relative inactivity though, he had been subjected to a rather trippy case of recall, Bibidi's memories being unlocked from within him, his own psyche, presented to Beerus for the first time in person. It all came to the fore. He had felt like he had met the cat before, even though he hadn't. That's how real the memories were for him. But at least with Goku's strong fighting, it once again saved Babidi and the others from certain doom from an unknown, powerful and colourful enemy, now turned somewhat assistant. However, deep in the far reaches of space, a similar entity to the little potato had emerged from the shadows. Might this one prove to be the reincarnation of Babidi, who would do his father / creator / ancestor / whatever proud? Or could this be the start of something entirely different? Especially when we get to mix magic and gods together, and hopefully come up with something that won't doom reality as we know it. Let's resume. After everything had calmed down to your typical Dragon Ball background noise, things were becoming quite stark in the potato's mind. There was a lot of distress in Babidi's little head after this whole ordeal with Beerus had gone down. Sure. The Earth was spared, as per usual, with the utmost luck and good fortune. But the sole fact that Goku, despite all his buffoonery and brash antics, had seriously managed to sway a god of destruction to his side and thinking, the one who was probably the most stubborn out of all of them, was both really impressive and really scary. When he recalled Goku sparing of him all those years ago against Majin Buu, it made that fact all the more frightening. Here was this rather imposing Saiyan, who had the power to dictate the actions of everyone on this planet, and he had chosen Babidi for a higher purpose. He acted like a Super Saiyan god. He had that much will for someone who was born into a rather simplistic race and purpose. He had outdone a great wizard like himself, and now he had soothed the brow of Beerus. This was all just totally crazy. Luckily for him though, Beerus most likely went back to sleep, so they wouldn't have to worry about him for a few more decades, right? Right? Well, I'm sorry, Potato, but he'll be back soon. But there was something else that the mage had to deal with at this time. Piccolo and Dende were right. The vision that he had had whilst the cat had gripped him so tightly that he felt that he was going to pass out, that did carry some weight to it beyond its physical strain. There was something weird about that fear after all, which was overcoming him every time the god of destruction was around. It was almost like it was some kind of trance that he was being subjected to every time the cat chose to gaze into his bulging eyes. He was a scary being, that thing was all too clear. But there was something else amongst all that. Something intriguing. It was like, deep down, his very being was trembling. Something that was stopping him from functioning even. Babidi kept recollecting that feeling every single day, needing to know what had happened that had caused Babidi to be so frightened of Beerus that it carried through generations. Aside from his position, of course. They must have had plenty of encounters that went badly for his progenitor. Babidi knew that if he were ever to get over this, find some peace, be able to be of some sort of use whenever Beerus was around, he had to do his own research. He had to figure out the problem that was Beerus. He had to check the notes and records of his father, now probably millions of years old. Thanks to the marvels of magic and the arcane, time was not able to wither and age their tellings. But in order to do that, find said records, he would have to leave the planet. And in order to leave the planet, he would have to...
Listen, Piccolo, would you care for a trip to space?
That's a sudden.
Babidi had no time for any of Piccolo's dry humour or posturing. He chose to keep his cool though, but assert his conviction.
Do not mock me, please. I'm serious.
He added through his teeth.
You know as well as myself that I cannot leave this planet without your supervision. And I took yours and your little guardian's words into consideration. There was truth concerning what you said, and it has something to do with the reason that I wish to seek further knowledge and truths. We should investigate that thing that keeps happening whenever Beerus is near me. It could be important to understanding him and preventing a total catastrophe from occurring.
Piccolo eyed him up with the utmost of caution.
What's the source of this catastrophe? Him or you?
Babidi groaned.
Just have faith in me here, will you? This isn't some inane hunch. This goes much deeper than that.
You have an idea where to look first?
Babidi nodded with his massive head.
I could return home.
Home? I didn't think your kind had a home. I thought you were made in a cave or something.
Babidi ignored the remarks and continued his musings.
I left that place long ago. Once I had started looking for Buu myself, but it was the laboratory I was assigned to by my father ages ago. We could check if he left any notes or clues or messages concerning Beerus and,
We don't have a spaceship readily available. Get one and I'll help you.
Babidi felt rather ambivalent right now. Granted, he was relieved to hear that Piccolo was ready to humour his request and not get in the way, but this still felt like a backhanded response.
You know that no one's going to give me a spaceship. You know that all too well. You're playing with me. They are your friends, not mine. Why must you torture me with your grandstanding, Namekian?
However, Piccolo was really not trying to assert his authority here. He was genuinely trying to be helpful. But unfortunately, after years of acerbic and cynical retorts towards the wizard, Babidi couldn't tell whether he was being sincere or not.
I'd start with Bulma and mention that I'd be around to keep an eye on you. That should get you what you need.
That's a stupid idea, Babidi thought. He is stupid. Bulma is a rather smart human being. She would sense a plot from a mile off. There is no way that she would just... All right, just return it in one piece, okay? Bulma nodded, handing Babidi the key card to take the giant vessel that had transported Goku to Namek all those years ago. The potato couldn't believe his luck. He had asked for something and had been graciously acknowledged. He didn't have to control her or manipulate her. She complied willingly.
Really?
Well, of course. You've been such a darling during the birthday party. And you were the only one that didn't try to rile up Beerus and escalate the situation any further. And you really came through with the decorations. Everyone loved them. Babidi felt a twinge of anger at that last statement.
What is wrong with you, yes, of course I did. That's me, Babidi the helpful wizard.
He had to keep himself in check. He wasn't used to getting his way. Not after years of having to toe the line with these earthlings, of course. When he left, Vegeta only glared at his wife.
You know, what you did might come back to haunt you, right?
Oh, come on. Piccolo will have an eye on him. Besides, cut him some slack, will ya? Has Babidi done anything bad since the green guy took him in? Vegeta looked away, choosing not to answer that, but knowing she had a point.
I don't doubt the Namekian's competence, but I still don't trust that little schemer one bit.
Huh, neither do I. We didn't really trust you the first few years you were around. And look where we are now. He didn't want to get into an argument right now. There wasn't really any need to do so. Still though, this little opportunistic potato looked like a lost cause. But then again, Vegeta thought to himself, taking a portion of ramen, he was a lost cause once as well. But nobody needed to know that. Are you being deep and introspective, honey?
What? Have you suddenly become like the Namekian and started reading my mind?
The preparations to depart for space didn't take that long, considering that most of the supplies they needed were simple water buckets for Piccolo, and the food rations that were required for Babidi were relatively minuscule in Bulma's eyes, seeing as she had gotten really used to Saiyan appetite. He wasn't a huge eater, Babidi. A couple of boxes of the stuff would easily see Babidi through the trip and back. When the two of them arrived to embark on the journey, Bulma reiterated her only caveat. Now remember, you two, this ship has to return in one piece. Understand?
I'll see to it that it does. Don't worry, Bulma.
Piccolo nodded slowly.
And also, thanks for putting up with this, Bulma.
He said that quietly so that Babidi wouldn't hear him. But the potato knew that he was being patronized. But right now, it didn't matter. He was able to follow through on his suppositions after all. And so, the unlikely duo then left for the stars. The trip would take them quite a ways from Earth, seeking a world which lay at the farthest reaches of the known universe, since this planet was fostered millions of years before humanity took so much as their first steps. It wasn't a first though for both of them either, that's for sure, travelling to space. But neither were they all that adept when it came to the act of piloting. And although the vessel had a great deal of automation, it still required a level of course correction that sort of unnerved Babidi every now and again, to ensure that the route that he had plotted would remain accurate.
I never had to do any of this getting to Earth, I mean. I had that Pui Pui guy pilot my old vessel for me. Sure, I had seen them fly the thing, but seeing is not doing. I understand that now all too well.
How did you manage to take control over someone as powerful as Deborah? That always crossed my mind.
Well, that was a weird tangent. But Babidi chose to reply, since there wasn't anything else to do.
Oh, that? Easy. We've been my lackey for about 300 years? Yes, 300 years. I managed to recruit him at a pretty low moment in his life. He was in a much darker state than you had seen him. I think he'd gotten bored of ruling over his portion of the demon realm, and that's why he wasn't really resistant to my control. It's almost like he wanted me to. He was a pretty useful minion, I will give him that. I like to think I gave him some sense of purpose. Give him something to do.
It's just weird to me though that a demon king would, no offense, follow a simple wizard.
Simple. Simple! Ha! My naive Namekian friend. I am a successor to the greatest space wizard that has ever lived.
Is that a fact?
Piccolo wasn't mocking him. That was the genuine question. But Babidi's buttons were still well and truly pressed.
What do you mean?
I believe in what you're saying, but did you or your father ever have any intel on that you were really the strongest wizards out there? I'm just curious, that's all. Something feels off with what you said.
Again, this weird feeling was starting to manifest itself. Babidi felt that he did know something, but something else was keeping that knowledge away from him, that he didn't understand. It was like every time he tried to delve into his head for answers and clues, said answers would evade his gazes and skulk away into even further depths, an internal game of keep away. In the same vein as those sudden strikes of fear whenever Beerus was nearby. They had to investigate this phenomena. It was really getting on his nerves. But at least he had proven himself right.
I hope so.
He decided to end the sentence. The journey took our unlikely duo several weeks to complete, and it wasn't rather exciting in terms of things happening, though. Piccolo noted, though, that Babidi wasn't really hostile toward him anymore. Granted, it wasn't a friendship per se, but at least he wasn't screaming all the time. It was as if he'd finally grown accustomed to him as his keeper and had accepted his fate. That he was grateful to be alive at least, aware of what Piccolo was to him now as well. After all that, they were able to reach planet Dorella, an assuming little cinder of a planet where Babidi had one of his many towers. It looked like, honestly, it hadn't seen much in terms of action for eons. A world which had had its moment in history, but had slipped into the darkness ever since, never to return to prominence again. Well, before today, that is. Babidi spotted the towers and felt hopeful.
I copied most of the books to my ship, but since that's gone, well, the original tomes should still be here. I need to take down the cliffs of protection. Otherwise, we'll end up being transformed into rocking chairs or who knows what. It's unspeakable.
And as they walked towards the tower, which could easily be mistaken for a rock formation, Babidi had to use the incantation of true seeing in order to see the shifting door. Then he had to dispel magic from the door.
There! We can go inside safely.
That's impressive. Since you know so many spells, couldn't you have just teleported us in without the need of a ship?
Do I look like a Yardratian to you? This is not some kind of video game that those brats play ad nauseum. Long-range teleportation is a very volatile thing, you know. Everything in space moves, right?
Alright, point taken. Goku makes it seem so easy with his instant transmission and all.
Do you think he's concerned with the risk?
No.
Piccolo chuckled, and Babidi shared a laugh with him. For the first time since they had met, it was the very first unironic thing that they had shared. But Babidi's good mood was quickly ruined with the state of the tower. It was a mess.
What happened here? I didn't leave in such a discordant disarray.
He wasn't throwing hyperboles out here either. The books and scrolls were laying around as if someone had been searching through the wizard's layers with great haste and made a mess.
You mean someone else has been here?
Yes, and quite recently. Like maybe a month or so ago. How did they get past the defensive cliffs?
Piccolo looked through some of the books and scrolls that were laying on the ground.
Crazy idea. But what if they didn't know how to put it back?
That's impossible. Only I know of this place. And of those spells.
Piccolo threw a book at him.
Check this out. Looks important.
Babidi caught the massive book, trying not to fall over in the process. It was describing a spell called Magical Simulacrum. It was a very detailed description of how one, a wizard, could create a doppelganger of themselves. Each would require a portion of magic from its creator. They were rather independent beings too, capable of dealing with tasks that the Maker could not. Once they would complete their mission, the Maker could reabsorb them and regain their power, becoming whole again. Also, in the case of the creator's death, the spell could be improved upon for the most promising of copies so that they attain the power of the creator instead, as a security measure. And also so at least some portion of the original would live on. Babidi swallowed loudly, reading the last paragraph. The criteria of choosing the inheritor may change, as the wizard could imprint certain behaviours like avoiding conflict with selected individuals on his doppelgangers, or acting in a certain way. If by any chance the inheritor stopped acting in the way that would be deemed worthy by his creator, the spell could choose the second best instead, by prompting it into action.
He disowned me. From beyond the grave? It's all your fault, Piccolo! You people made me soft! I've been disowned! Disowned! I'm going to get replaced! I've had enough of your mind games! You want the real mind games? Fine! Pa-ra-da-pa-pa!
And that's where we're going to be leaving things right now.